Vedic texts are the literary evidence for reconstructing the history of Vedic age. The Vedas happen to be the earliest literature of the world. The word Veda means supreme knowledge. The Aryans believed that the Vedas were the words of God. In this chapter, we will study the following topics: Vedas, Aryans, spread of the Aryans, the king, political organization, Sabha and Samiti, the family, the village, the Aryans and the Dasyus, life of the people. The Aryans. The word Arya in the Sanskrit language means noble and free-born. The Aryan people were men of noble character and high ideals. They were fair-complexioned and tall in stature. From their original home in Central Asia, the Aryans spread to different parts of the world. Those who came to India are called Indo-Aryans. They came to India sometime between 2000 BC and 1500 BC. Advent of Aryans. They were pastoral people. They migrated from their original home because of 1. The increase in their number, 2. in search for new grasslands, and 3. the changing climate of Central Asian region. The Aryans first settled in the Sapta Sindhu region. From there, they moved eastwards into the river valleys of Ganga and the Yamuna, north of Delhi, where a river called Saraswati then flowed. It has since dried up. Here they stayed for quite a long period, composing the hymns of the Rigveda. In due course, this area came to be known as Kurukshetra, where the great battle of Mahabharata between the Kauravas and the Pandavas is said to have taken place. Ganga Valley. Sometime later, they moved eastwards into the Ganga Valley. There they cleared the thick forests, burnt and cut them down with iron axes. Iron was a new discovery. We know that the Indus people used copper and bronze, but the Aryans used iron. This is the primary contribution of the Aryans to the human civilization. It was around this time that iron came to be used in Western Asia and Europe too. But in India, the Iron Age was brought in by the Aryans. Old literature. There are 4 Vedas: Rigveda, Samaveda, Yajurveda, and Atharva Veda. The earliest, namely the Rigveda, was composed in about 1500 BC. It is a collection of 1028 hymns. These hymns were composed in praise of the gods and goddesses by sages, rishis. The Vedas contain a great deal of wisdom as well as information about how the Aryans lived. Upanishads and Brahmanas. The Upanishads or the Vedanta contain the views of great saints. Since common people were not able to understand the Vedas and Upanishads, new explanatory notebooks were written in simple prose. The Brahmanas, as they were called, furnished a detailed picture of Vedic people. This period of Indian history is known as the Vedic age because Vedic texts are the main source of information about this age. Later on, archaeologists also found some distinctive vessels made of clay dating back to this age. Hence, now it is possible to use both literary and archaeological sources to study the history of the Vedic age. Political organization. The Aryans were very powerful. They were divided into tribes and each tribe settled in a particular region. Since they kept large herds of cattle, they required grasslands to feed them. So, the various tribes generally fought with each other over grasslands. Each tribe had its king, also called Rajan or chief, who would lead the tribe in these fights. Therefore, only a strong and brave man was selected as a king. During the later Vedic period, kingship became a hereditary institution. When one king died, his son became his successor or the new king. The king was highly respected. He ruled according to the wishes of the tribe. So, he usually enjoyed the confidence and loyalty of the people. Headmen. The king also sought the advice of the headmen of villages, gramanis of grams or villages of his tribe. But when it came to matters of the utmost importance, the king would seek the advice of the entire tribe. Sabha and Samiti. Sabha and Samiti were two institutions to check the powers of the king. Samiti was the national committee of the whole tribe. All important issues were discussed in it. Anyone could speak out his mind about a problem. The Sabha appears to have been a small assembly. Selected people took part in its meetings. Several tribe assemblies such as Sabha, Samiti, Vidhata, Gana are mentioned in the Rigveda. Family. The family was the smallest administrative unit. Families were patriarchal. The eldest male member of the family was the head of the family. He was called Grihapati. All powers of the family were vested in him. He made all the decisions and other family members had to accept his decision. Women also had an important place in the family and society. The family structure was one of joint family. Even after their marriage, sons lived with their father. Villages. A number of families living together formed a village. The tribe was spread over many villages. The village was called Gram. In the beginning, villages were small in size, but when people gave up the nomadic way of life and took to agriculture, villages became larger. Society. Early Vedic society was simplicity at its best. It was a relatively advanced civilization based on a settled way of life and a well-organized social system. Over a period of time, three groups emerged in the Aryan society. Kings and their warriors were the most powerful group. They were called Kshatriyas. The group of priests or Brahmins was also equally important. Then came the craftsmen, traders, and cultivators. They were called Vaishyas. With the passage of time, a fourth group came into being. This consisted of Dasyus, who did all the menial work. They were looked down upon by the other three groups. This new group came to be known as Shudras in the later Vedic period. Brahmin. Each one of these groups had a distinct occupation. The Brahmins held a respectable position in society. They performed religious rituals called yajanas. The Kshatriyas were also greatly respected. In earlier times, a boy was free to choose his occupation, but later on, it became the custom for a son to do the same work as his father. Food. The diet was mainly rice, barley, fish and fruits. Madhu, Sura and Soma were the favorite drinks. Sura was an intoxicating drink. Soma was also a mildly intoxicating beverage. Difficult to prepare, it was mostly consumed during religious ceremonies. On the whole, the food of the Aryans was simple but nourishing. Dress. The dress worn by the Aryans was not very different from that of the Harappans. They wore two pieces of cloth, the upper cloth and the lower cloth. They covered their heads with a turban. Another garment that touched their ankles was also in use. The rich wore clothes with golden thread embroidery. Women wore ornaments such as rings, earrings, and necklaces. These were made of gold or other metals. Women also wore beads worn in various designs and fashions. Amusements. The Aryans had many kinds of amusements. Hunting was a favored pastime, but their favorite pastime appears to have been gambling. They gambled with dice. Chariot racing was a favorite pastime of kings and princes, just as it was in other cultures. Occupations. Agriculture was the main occupation of the Aryans. Apart from agriculture, other occupations were cattle rearing, fishing, metal work, carpentry, and tanning. Iron had been discovered in India a little before 1000 BC. Weapons and tools were made of iron, copper, or bronze, but iron was the most preferred since it was a hard, strong metal. Religion. In the early stage, the Aryan religion was simple, but it gradually became more and more complex. Nature was worshipped and sacrifices were offered to gods. Nature worship. The Aryans worshipped the various forces of nature. Their gods and goddesses were the sky, the sun, the stars, the moon, the earth, the wind, the trees, the rivers, and the mountains. Each had a name. Indra was the god of thunder and rain, and also the god of strength and the vanquisher of the Aryans' enemies. Agni was the god of fire. The name is similar to igneous, the Latin word for fire. Agni was worshipped by adding huge quantities of ghee, a cooking fat made from cow's milk. The god of fire dominated all domestic rituals. All sacred rites, including marriages, were performed in his presence. Surya was the sun god. Usha was the goddess of dawn. Aryans performed different sacrifices to please a particular god or goddess.